I've been continuing to read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich and really enjoying it. Um, I enjoy history. I enjoy world history, World War II history. I find interesting, just from a historical perspective. The events, the battles, the different politics behind the scenes, etc. But as I've talked about in other videos, I find this book particularly interesting because it has such rich insight into the Nazi regime, the Third Reich, how it was formed, Hitler's beliefs and views, decisions that were made, the thinking behind the decisions, right? There's lots of journal entries and side conversations that are captured and sourced. So it's, as I've said, it's a really interesting view into Hitler and his mind and his mental math. And as I've said in past videos, he lived up to the horrific hype. Obviously, in the brutality and the horrible things that he did, but also in terms of his ability to manipulate, his ability to, in many ways, understand the flaws of the mind and use them to his advantage. And I've been talking a lot in these videos, or at least of the last couple of days, about cognitive outs. So these things that our mind looks for to avoid facing an inconvenient truth. That inconvenient truth could be something about ourselves, and who we really are as people. It could be something about somebody else or a situation. It could be something that we know is true, that we don't have the ability to do something or to face a challenge, right? Whatever it is, maybe we're weaker than we want to admit. And what I think one of the things in which Hitler did horribly well was understand people that he was dealing with and how to feed them a consistent diet of cognitive outs, how to keep them totally passive, right? Appeasement being obviously what the Western European leaders did in many ways, but even people within Germany who opposed him, but really you saw it play out maybe most predominantly, as many know historically, with the UK, with England. And the way in which he did it, with Chamberlain, Neville Chamberlain, was pretty interesting to see. And you see conversations they had, you see letters that were written, and some of it was just blatant lies. And you look at it and you say, well, Hitler's clearly lying, right? He would make promises often about peace, and he would sign treaties. He would recommend treaties. I guarantee I'm not going to take any more land, or I guarantee I won't attack anybody. And this is the last of my requests, right? Lots of guarantees and promises, and he would just serve them up to the point where, as obviously the objective reader, in hindsight, you look at it and you say, well, obviously, you can't just take the man at his word. Just because he's saying it doesn't mean that it's true. But at the time, it served as the perfect cognitive out. And many of us know the context, right? Europe was exhausted of war. The European countries were still in somewhat shambles from World War II, and there was lots of different political issues going on. And there was the dynamics of France and England, and then Germany, and then Czechoslovakia and Russia, and all these different players involved, and people just wanted to avoid it. So from Hitler's perspective, he understood that. And, in very simple ways, in this case, he gave them the outs they wanted. They did not want to go to war. They wanted to believe so badly that everything would be fine and there wouldn't be any issues, and that if they just did enough, they could put this thing to bed. And so Hitler just kept feeding them that. Like, yeah, no, this will be fine. There'll be no war. Isn't that what you want? And it was, well, yeah, shit. Of course that's what I want. So rather than face the inconvenient truth of, hey, this guy may be lying and we may have to go to war, or we may have to do some hard work here to really rein this guy in, and we may have to be willing to risk war, risk other things. Didn't want to face that. The mind didn't want it. It didn't want to look at that inconvenient truth. So when given those cognitive outs, it took them every single time, up to a point. And again, you just see it time and time again. I mean, other things Hitler did was he was a master at political revolution, about staging insurgencies and planting the seeds for different things in Austria and Czechoslovakia, really all over, even in Poland to an extent. And it gave cognitive outs to people. As he would step into areas and take them over, he would spin a story that, well, there was violence in the area, and Germans that lived in Czechoslovakia or wherever it might be, they're being harmed, or they're being attacked, or they're being put at risk, and we have to protect them. Or the government there actually wanted us to come in to help straighten things out. All these things that, when you step back objectively in hindsight and look at, were clearly not true, or at least where there was enough evidence that you needed to question it deeper. They were beautifully crafted cognitive outs that when, again, the UK or France looked at it and said, subconsciously even, I do not want to go to war here. And there was a sliver of something that said, well, what Hitler did, what Germany did actually wasn't that bad. They were protecting German citizens. Okay, that's the out I need. I don't have to go there. I don't have to face the thing I don't want to face. And his ability, again, Hitler's, to recognize that and to keep them on a diet of that just really set the foundation for the war. I mean, it allowed him to build up the strength he needed, allowed him to do all the things he needed. And even at the end, towards the end, when the Western powers really started to recognize, and it was just too much, right? Their mind couldn't hide it anymore or take the outs anymore, because there was no more outs to be had. It was just too obvious what was happening. He gave a speech towards the end, directed mainly at the U.S. actually, but also at France and UK, about actions they've taken. So now it was starting to get to a point where people were saying, like, hey, Hitler's full of shit. He's trying to, enforce German rule in other countries. He's trying to take things. He's at times being violent. He's not playing the way a good democracy would play, right, or a good free country would play. Well, he spun that on all those countries, and he started listing out the things, the colonization that the UK had done, things in the US that had been done over the Civil War and slavery and, all sorts of different things to highlight. Hey, like, you guys are trying to make me like I'm some, evil mastermind who's going to destroy the world. I'm not doing that many things different than you. And again, the cognitive outs were there, whether it be for the people in those countries who had to say we want to go to war, and we see this, whether it be in Hitler's own country, to, is he a monster or is he just like them, right? And so all these cognitive outs were just constantly being placed, and they did exactly what they were meant to do. They gave many people, influential people who had the ability to make a decision to do the harder thing. It gave them the option to take the out and to feel okay about it, to feel like there's nothing wrong here. I'm following the right protocol. And this gets back to that concept, and I'll just touch on it here at the end. We've talked about, the really impactful, meaningful actions we could take as humans is when we do the thing to help others when it seems totally at odds with what makes sense for us to do, right? Everything seems to be pointing us to do A, but somehow we see it and recognize that, no, I'm going to do B because there's something bigger to be gained here in the long term. And I think this is reflective of that. In this instance, all the different European leaders felt so sure. All these cognitive outs had them feeling like, no, I'm following the right protocol. I'm doing the right thing. But you have to be willing to question that, because it might not be the right thing. It might not be the truly hard thing that you need to do. So when you feel that, when the moment's important and significant, like, a world war at stake, and you feel like, oh, this is all very, simple, it's straightforward, this is the right path for me to be taking, stop yourself. Maybe that's the trap. Maybe there's a different path that's actually better. It just doesn't feel right yet. You have to think deeper about it. You need to get your math a little bit more sophisticated in how you're processing it and seeing the full chessboard. So an example of that for sure.